In this one, I'm going to talk about the Wigglebones 2 add-on, and I talked about it a little bit in my last video, my main channel video about making my character and the animation scenes and stuff like that, and how I use Wigglebones. This is where you can download it. It is free. There are some bugs that I have tried to report already that I'll talk about, but I am still gonna use it. Like it's good, and I don't want to stop using it even if there are bugs. I'll learn to work around them. But yeah, you can go download it here. It does work for 4.0. That's what I've been using it with. So let's get started. I guess I'll just make a very simple armature just to show you what it's all about, and then I'll make like a simple character and apply it to that and show you. Oh yeah, basically you download it, and then if you don't know how to install add-ons, you go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, Install. I don't think it's in a zip. Is it? No. Basically anything that is zipped into a zip file, don't unzip it. This one is not, so you don't have to worry about it. But you basically go to install, then you can find it and install it that way. And then when you do, it will appear on the side over here. But yeah, it should be muted right here. So basically make an armature. I'm going to tab into edit mode right here, and I'm just going to extrude a few of these. It doesn't really matter, exactly what. You don't have to follow along with this, whatever, it doesn't matter. Wigglebones, you control it in pose mode. So go into pose mode with Control Tab, or you can do that up here. Now you should turn, let me hide everything else. You can unmute the scene, which just means that it's, if you have things that are using Wigglebones and you mute the scene right here, then they'll all stop working, which is nice for, you don't want it always going and slowing things down. But now we should be able to select any of these things and click bone tail. I'll explain the difference between head and tail at some point. But now you won't really notice anything different until you press the space bar. And now you might have seen that it just moved a little bit. So let's just move it. And again, it is playing right now. So actually, just so it doesn't reset constantly, let's just set this to something like 3000 or whatever. I move this and that bone is wiggling. We can add it to this bone too. And now both of those bones are wiggling. Let's just select all of these bones right here, these 4, and we can add, well, you have to make sure that one is selected first as the active selection. And you can see how it's it's like slightly lighter. That just means that it's the active one. You can turn it on for all of them at the same time. You don't have to hold Alt or anything like that. That's like kind of a typical thing in Blender if you want to make multiple things, multiple objects or bones or whatever be affected by changing settings like this. Usually you have to hold Alt while you change the settings, but with this you don't have to worry about that. So now it's applied to all of those, and we just get some really weird, cool motion for free. We do have some options in here. And again, when you have a bunch of bones selected, when you change these, it will change for all of them, which is pretty nice actually. Just so I don't have to constantly like move it around to show you what's going on, I'm actually going to go back to the first frame with Shift and the left arrow. I'm going to turn on auto keyframe. Just press play, and then I can, move it around like this. And it's basically just recording my actions to see like what it looks like. Then I'll, stop recording. You can see we have all of these keyframes in the beginning. So now whenever I want to actually test something, I can just go back to the beginning with Shift and left arrow like that. And I should be able to just select these, and we'll be able to see in real time what's going on. So the main thing that you'll probably be messing with is the stiffness right here, and the gravity. So if I just turn the gravity up, you'll see it'll start like drooping like that. It's just like getting really heavy basically. And if I turn the stiffness down really low, like if I change this to maybe like 100, now it's like much more wobbly. It's like the joints are really loose or something like that, and it's like taking a lot longer to kind of catch up. Or you could also just turn it up really high and it will still wobble, but just like a little less. It's much more stiff. You know, that's why it's called stiffness. Another thing is you might not like how bouncy this looks. Like it maybe you think it bounces back and forth too much. That's what the dampening is for, the damp value. So we can just like turn this up to like 10 maybe, and you can see it is still wiggling, but it's not like as springy, you know, because I could turn the dampness value to like, I think like really low, like 0.1, and it will just like not stop wiggling. Like it's very springy. It doesn't lose energy as much. So the damp value is also pretty good. Stretch, pretty obvious. If you turn it up to like 1, that's too high. So maybe turn it to something like below 1, like a 0.2 or something. Then things will stretch very slightly. So let's actually delete all of these there, and I'll just show you what I mean. If I turn this up maybe to like 0.5, something a little higher, bounce this up and down, you can see the length of this is going to like change very slightly, like that, stretchy. So you can do some pretty cool things with this. You can basically use this on like chains for a tail or for hair or whatever. And one thing you might be wondering, because I was definitely wondering about this, is like, what if these were already keyframed? Then what happens? Does it overwrite it? The answer is no. You can still keyframe all of these and it should work. So just to show you that, I'll turn it off. So, you know, this shouldn't be working now. It's just, you know, like normal. Let's just like insert some keyframes. I'll just go to the keying set and turn on location, rotation, scale. That way, whenever I press I, it's just going to insert for all of those. So we have that. Let's go here. I'm going to set this to individual origins. I changed the pivot point right there. So you can do that up here. Sorry, I kind of move fast sometimes and I'm trying to explain everything, but yeah, so you can change the pivot point up here to individual origins, or you can press period, not the one on the numpad but on your keyboard, and that just makes it so when you rotate it, they kind of curl like this instead of moving as like one unit like that. So yeah, actually, you know, let's just set this to auto I. Then we can scroll bar to move these around a little bit. So I can maybe select these like that. Then I'm just moving it around a little bit just so that you can see that it is working basically. Okay, we got 3. That's enough. This one, I'll just reset it and I'll turn auto IK off. Okay, so it's moving a little bit like that. Maybe let's duplicate this a few times. Okay, so it's moving like this. Now, if I add wiggle bones, these still have their settings that I was using, and you can see it's doing the animation, but it's kind of adding the wiggle on top of it, which is pretty cool. I really enjoy that because it means you can add this to everything, or anything rather. I probably wouldn't add it to literally everything because that will get pretty messed up. But you can add this to things that are already animated to see how they'll react, and it just makes the motion like look so much more. Well, one of the like principles of animation or whatever is like follow through and like anticipation and stuff like that, and secondary motion, things like that. So this kind of adds some more like follow through instead of just like, you know, instead of going from here to here, it's going past it and then bouncing back a little bit. And it will do that for, you know, any of the bones that you are using it with. And that's just a thing that will naturally happen in real life because of like, you know, you take something that's really heavy, that's moving fast, and you try to stop it, and it takes a while to stop it, you know? So it's kind of mimicking that. You can obviously just keyframe all this yourself, but it takes a while. So the difference between the tail and the head, for instance, is you can see none of these have the option to even change the head. This one at the very end does. Head will, how do I explain this? Okay, so in order to explain this, I'm going to come back in here. I'm just going to duplicate this. You can see that it's parented to this bone right here. So this one will have a head option. We can just take a look at that. Not a good example. I should duplicate this one because it's parented to the main bone right here. So now when I move this, you can see all of those are rotating. This one is also rotating. If I turn tail off, it will no longer rotate. If I turn head on, it will move around, but it won't rotate. I don't know if that makes any sense. You can see it's kind of like bobbling, and this only works if nothing is attached to the head, I believe. So you can see like this thick and that's the head. All of these are occupied. They're like connected to other things, so you can't really change the location. You're only just changing it like it's a hinge or something. But these, you could turn it down like a lot lower to be able to tell, like 100. You can see it's kind of bouncing up and down like that. So that's the difference between head and tail, is that like, unless I turn tail on, this is not really going to rotate. It's just going to change the location. But as soon as I turn tail on, maybe I can turn this down too to like 100. You can see now it's moving. It's changing the rotation and the location. So, you know, that's the difference. All right, now let's just hide this, I suppose, and make like a simple character. So I'm just going to use my like skin method. We can add in a mirror modifier. And yes, this method does work. A lot of people ask like, you should update it because it doesn't work for the new version. It still works. Don't worry about that. I don't need to explain any of this. Basically make a character. You can follow the skin modifier video. Now I can come into pose mode and we can see if this works. Let's go to auto IK up here, and you can use the scroll bar to move that. So this does work. Cool. Okay, so we made this. Let's just make sure it is in front. Okay. Okay, so now we can add wiggle bones to this. So this would be nice if I'm not going to animate it right now, but you could add this to like the arms right here, like that. And now whenever we move like the body over here, if I turn this off, auto IK, now the arms are wobbly. So you can kind of do some ragdoll type stuff with this, which is pretty cool. We could also do that for the legs right here. But again, make sure that one of them is the active selection. Otherwise, you're not going to get the correct values. That was still using the values for like for the arms. We can turn that on. Now we have wobbly legs too. It's nice to sometimes give certain parts different like stiffness values. So let's add it to the collarbone. I think this might get a little too wobbly for the collarbone maybe. So we can actually just like make that maybe like 700, something like that. Yeah, I probably should have more bones in here, but I'm not going back now. So yeah, we have a ragdoll now. Okay. Another thing in here that is pretty cool is we also have collisions. So let's go back out here and add in like a cube or something like that. So I'll add in a cube in edit mode. I'm just going to press GZ-1 to move it down like that. Then I can scale it up. So we have a floor right here, and I'll apply the scale with Control A. Now back in pose mode, we can let's select all of the wiggle bones. So we can do that with select enabled right here under global utilities. And then we can select the cube as the collision object. So now when we press play, you can see the feet just bounced up a little. They will try to not go through. Now, right now they have no radius, so it's basically just kind of treating them like lines. So like half the leg is going through right now. Let's move it up a little bit and just select all of the wiggle bones. Select all the wiggle bones. We do have a radius right here, so I will hold shift and turn this up very slowly, and you can see the feet right here are going to move. So you can just turn this up to a point where you think it makes sense. Maybe right around there. I think you don't want to turn it up too high because then it'll kind of float like this. It will never actually look like it's touching. I'd rather have it go through it just a little bit. But now we can, move this around and drag it on the floor and do stuff like that. If you do try to drag it completely through, it will resist and it will get kind of glitchy. So just know that this will kind of glitch it out and kind of start scaling and whatever. But yeah, you can do some pretty fun things with this. As you can see, like, imagine this just being animated would be pretty funny on its own. All right, let's bring this back to the center. What else? There's baking. I have experimented in other videos with like making puppets, and basically the way that I do that or have done that, and it even says, I didn't notice until after, but it says on here that you can use a damped track constraint to pin wiggle bones to a target. And that's basically, I used a damp track. So basically what you can do is go into edit mode. Let's turn on mirroring. So when I duplicate a bone, it's duplicating for both. And this, it doesn't really matter. I'm just like being pretty sloppy with it. But these should both probably be parented to the root. So I'll do that. And then back in pose mode, I believe what we can do is select this, shift select this one right here. basically you're selecting the target first. So I want this to target that bone. So select this, shift select that, Control Shift C to add a constraint, and I want to add the damped track right here. So now you can see it's always going to try to point at it over here. We can do the same thing for this. So shift select this, shift select this, Control Shift C, damped track. Now when we press play, it's gonna like reach for those arms like that. Let's make sure yeah, okay. So yeah, now you can kind of use that. It's kind of acting like an IK constraint, which is pretty weird, right? But you can kind of do some puppet style stuff with this, which is pretty cool. A thing that I noticed too is if you turn, I believe it was a stretching up very slightly for these, it will like act a little differently. I can do like maybe 0.1. I'm just doing all this on stream, so maybe this isn't the way to do it. I think before what I did was I actually did use an IK constraint, and the IK bone, I was making it try to go to the damped track. So let's turn that back down. But yeah, now you could add like a head. Sorry, turn the tail off for both of these and turn like head on for both, so these bounce. I can turn this to something a little lower, like 100, like that. Maybe bring it, if I bring it closer, if I bring this closer, I think I'd have to keyframe it. So let's bring it closer right here. It's acting a little weird, and we can keyframe that. Okay, so now when I move this, it's acting a little differently because these are targeting that. So yeah, it's kind of cool, pretty neat. Let's like make these like really floppy though. I think if you have these as wiggle bones, then when you try to move them, it won't really work while it's playing. And that's why I keyframed them so they would be closer. So if you do want to like be able to move them around, you don't want them to bounce and stuff, then you should turn the wiggle bones off until you're ready for that. But they're also keyframed, so I can delete the keyframes also. And you can get these like weird floppy characters. I think it's very fun. You could like if you really wanted to, you could rig a whole character like this, where instead of using, it's just using the damped track and wiggle bones. Let's fight. Let's get the other one going. Yeah, those are fighting moves. Yeah, so there's our animation. Now, say for instance, you want to bake this, you can do that with this bake option over here. So I will go over to my animation tab. Mine might be set up a little differently from yours, but what I recommend doing is opening up the dope sheet. I like to use the NLA editor. It is kind of confusing. I know it's kind of bad, but I like to use it to layer actions and stuff. And it's definitely worth talking about in this case because you can get some different options from it basically. So let's just like make the animation its own action up here. So I went to the action editor, and now I can set this to, let's just call it like punching or something like that. So we have this action and it's called punching. We can turn the wiggle scene off and we will still have this animation right here. Okay, we'll never lose this, which is nice, unless we decide to overwrite it, which we can do if we want. So going to wiggle, go to global wiggle utilities, bake wiggle. Okay, so here we get to decide, do we want it to loop? What do we want the quality to be? The pre-roll is basically like how many frames do you want it to simulate for before actually like starting to bake. Then we have overwrite current action. I believe that's what it is. Overwrite current action. So that is basically just going to replace this right here. So unless you want to do that, then I recommend not doing it. And then we have current action to NLA, which basically creates a new action and then puts it over here. Okay, so I would recommend setting your, setting your timeline to like only as long as you need it to be. Otherwise it's going to take forever to bake. So I'll just set this to like 280 or something right here. And then I'll show you. So let's do a little test actually. So the way that I usually do it is I select enabled right here. It's just going to select all the wiggle bones and then I bake wiggle. That's it. Usually I push it to the NLA, but let's just try bake wiggle. Okay, might take a second. So now we have a new action. You can see, it didn't push anything to the NLA editor. Like there are no extra strips basically. We have this action in here. and it will automatically freeze it. So like wiggle bones are not trying to like work at the same time as it, you know, like two sets of wiggle bones on top of each other. It could get kind of messed up if you do that. So what you can see is it only baked the wiggle bones, the movement from these bones. Because I didn't have them selected, it didn't bake it. So let's go back. This is why I wanted to test it kind of on stream. Okay, so I can, instead of selecting enabled, I can select everything. Now let's try it. Bake wiggle and see if that works. And we can close that. No, so it still doesn't work. Okay, so that is only going to bake the wiggle bones. Everything else is not going to be baked. So that's one reason why I use the NLA editor. Basically, we can push this down. It creates a strip right here like that. We have that action of just the punching. And if you want to edit it, you can select it and press tab to continue editing, and then come back to the NLA editor and press tab again to leave it. Now we can instead choose current action to NLA. I'll select enabled current action to NLA, bake the wiggle, and now we have this separate action. Okay, and it's going to be like on top of the regular action. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so now we have kind of the movement from both. I don't know if this is making any sense to you. Honestly, if you don't use the NLA editor, I kind of recommend not using the bake option here. There is another way that I think is a little better. So let's Control Z to go back, remove that action from the NLA editor. Okay, so the way that I would recommend doing it if you're not going to use the NLA editor, I like to use the NLA editor, so that's the way that I actually do it. But what you can do is just select everything in here, press F3 to search, or whatever you set your search button to. By default, it should be F3. You can go to bake action. I don't think it matters which one you choose, but I'll choose the second one, bake action. You can choose the frame, like, you know, the frame range rather, if you only want selected bones. So if you want to select everything, then you can turn this off. Visual keying I always put on. Overwrite current action will make it so that this is like being overwritten. It's going to disappear. And that's it. You do want to make sure this is baking pose data. We're in pose mode, so we want like movement from bones and stuff like that. And then we can just press OK. Now this won't pause wiggle bones, so you can just pause it yourself. Now this should work because it was baking all of the bones. This is just like Blender's internal way of baking actions and stuff like that. So this should work, and your original animation should still be here. See, it's punching right here. I don't know if you noticed, when they have a 0 next to them, that means if you close and then open it up again, these won't be saved. So if you do want to save this, use the little shield icon. And then even if you have this, even if you're using this, you close it, open it up again, things with F next to them will be saved. It means fake user. So yeah, that's how you could do it. What else? I think that is that kind of it. You can also keyframe the values of the wigglebone stuff. So one thing we could do is, let's go back to, we could save this, just call it wiggle bake, and then go back to punching right here. We can turn this on. If we want, we can keyframe the wiggle values. Let's just go back over here. So if I wanted, I could say that it starts off stiff or really loose, and over time it will get up to like 1,000 or something, and then you can keyframe it like that. This is only going to keyframe that one apparently, which is kind of weird, but whatever. So you would have to do it for, you know, each individual one, I believe. Yeah, there's probably a way to go about it in the graph editor or in the dope sheet or whatever. Not that. Open up the dope sheet. I'm just going to test this out real quick just to see. If we select all these bones, go over here, we could insert for all channels. Let's see, let's change this to 100, then see if maybe we can update it over here. It seems like it did update it over there. Now let's see if we can update it over here too. Change this to 1,000, and then yeah, so I think you have to insert the first keyframe, but then you should be able to insert keyframes on all channels in here, and it will, you can see it's like changing the stiffness value over time like that. It will get more rigid. So it starts off floppy, and then eventually it gets a little more stiff. I don't know. That can be pretty useful. Sometimes I have my character kind of like clapping their hands and stuff like that. But if the wiggle is too high, then their hands like float through each other and stuff. So that's a situation where it can be nice to either, like change the stiffness value. But usually what I do is I just bake it. And then in the graph editor, what I'll do, let's open up the wiggle bake. What I do is I open it up in the graph editor, find out like where the hands meet and like on what channel. So usually it would be like, I would search for the X location. You can just search up here, X location, and then this is all the X location data right here. This would make more sense to view on the Y because the hands are moving like that. So I could search for Y location. We'll have like probably more consistent movements, I would think. Or actually, you know what? This is going to be all rotation data. So I actually don't know which one that would be because I didn't really test these out that much. This would be like, I don't know, close to the X rotation. But anyway, I would find out where it's like overlapping, and sometimes you can see little spots like this where it's like reverberating, and you can kind of just like take this and scale it like S to scale Y and then 0 to like flatten it out, things like that, and just make it so that, you know, it doesn't go past a certain point. Basically, I know a lot of people probably don't like working in the graph editor, but if you set things up correctly and you know what you're doing, then it can, you know, it's not too hard to figure out like, oh, this is moving in this direction. I don't want it to go past this point. So then you just find when it is going past that point and you just scale it and you say, don't go past this point right here. You can even check it. So like if you're saying, if the ground is at the 0 point, then you just make it so it never goes past the 0 point. This is the Y, so that wouldn't actually be the ground. You would have to do it on like the Z or whatever, the Z location. But most likely it kind of depends on like a lot of stuff like the bone orientation and stuff like that. But yeah, that's how you would do that. Let's see, is there anything else? There's wind. I haven't really messed around with wind. I think that's kind of it. So oh, you know what? I didn't talk about bugs. Let's talk about a bug. Okay, let's go back to punching right here where we have, no, that's fine. Okay, so one weird thing that I noticed is right now, like everything's working fine. The gravity's working good and all that. As soon as I add a strip into the video sequence editor, which for a lot of you probably doesn't really matter. For me, I do that when I do lip syncing. Let's actually like take a look at this really quick. Okay, so like it's flopping, it's moving normal, it's, you know, doing all that stuff. Let's maybe like add some more motion just so we can see it, you know, doing other stuff. Woo! Okay, all right, that's enough. Okay, so none of this is baked, it's just going in real time. So now I have the video sequence editor right here. I use this for lip syncing. So usually what I'll do is I'll go to the beginning, Shift A, bring in like a clip or whatever. I just have some in here. So let's choose the outro. I'm gonna turn audio scrubbing, or I'm gonna mute it just so we can't hear it because I don't think we need to. Also, this is a video clip, so we don't need that. This is just the audio. Now it doesn't work. What's up with that? And the thing is, it's not that it doesn't work. It seems like it's the gravity that's kind of messing with things. So let's select the bones. Go back over here. Okay, so let's select the bones and just turn the gravity off for all of them. And let's also like clear the keyframes, clear the frames for all these. I don't want these to be animated. Okay, so, and we can also make these a lot like looser, 100. I think usually with my character, I turn the gravity off and set the stiffness to be really low. So you get a much different result. But for some reason, whenever I add a strip to the video sequence editor, the values change a lot, especially like the stiffness has to be way lower for me to notice it. And I kind of can't use gravity without it glitching. So let's like turn it up just a little. And it's like the gravity is super high. So that's just one of the downsides. I don't know. I did post on the other day just to see if anybody has heard of it. And I know the creator is there also, so maybe he will see it. It does work a little with very small amounts of gravity, but it's not meant to be used this way. It shouldn't change. So I think it is a bug. But other than that, I haven't really found any like noticeable bugs. It can be kind of weird. I know this has gone on for pretty long, but it can be kind of weird with when you're dealing with, let's see, with characters that have a lot of like IK constraints and stuff like that. So I'll add one in just so I can show you real quick, he says. All right. Okay. So, you know, we have this character. You can download this for free. At some point I will update it and make it better, but this doesn't have any wiggle bones yet. I am playing basically because this is using IK. I could instead put like a bone head wiggle on this controller right here. So we can do that. And now it won't work because of, let me just reopen it, because of the video sequence editor. As soon as I do that, the file is just kind of messed up, you know? So let's just add this to a new file. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm in a new file now, so it should work fine. And I just have to go into pose mode, select that bone, and add a bone head like that. Okay, so now you can see this is working like that, like kind of how you would expect, I suppose. Except it's not making the whole like arm wiggly. It's just moving this bone right here. So I could turn it down like really low or whatever. So yeah, that's like one way you could do it. I do have a switch on here, so I believe it's this one. If I turn these on, then it is using the deforming bones in here. And then you could also, you know, turn these into wiggle bones right here. So we could do that. And now it's not following the IK constraint. So if you have like a complex rig using like Rigify or something like that, this is going to be a little more weird to use because you're going to have to find like, you're either going to be using wiggle bones on like using the bone head like I did before, or you're going to have to find the deforming bones and set it to that instead. And sometimes with like Rigify, that can be pretty hard to find. So you saw that it was like bouncing and stuff right there. I just turned the quality up. It's not bouncing as much, but it does make it slower in the viewport. So, oh, I turned it up to 100. I meant 10. Okay. But yeah, when it bounces like that, I haven't noticed that too much in bakes. I think it's just kind of a viewport problem. But so yeah, you have to make sure that you add it to the right bones, basically. That is a thing that I imagine confuses a lot of people. I don't like really use Rigify, and I like to make a lot of stuff myself. So I always know like which bones to add it to. But yeah, you got to know which bones to add it to. Otherwise it's not going to work right. So I could add it to the head right here, but I don't know if it will actually move because of some other controllers and stuff I have. Like, I think this one, like there are constraints that are getting in the way. So now the head will bobble, but it won't actually move around because this has an IK constraint. If I turn that off, then I can turn all of the body bones on right here and it will, you know, start getting really wobbly and stuff. Like you can do some cool things, but you have to know which bones to add it to, basically is what I'm saying. Other than that, I think it's a great add-on. I think you should check it out. It adds a lot of like motion for free. And if I can find a way to donate to the creator, then I would love to, but I haven't found a way yet. I think they're just doing it for free, and that's really cool, but I would totally donate for it, even if I didn't have to pay. Anyway, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and bye.